Welcome back to Success is Weird and Messy, the podcast where I, Kathleen Gabriel, talk with business owners about all the things that can happen when you carve your own path and how to turn obstacles into opportunities. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Jessica Lyonford, a leadership consultant and the owner of Project More Happy. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Oh, Kathleen, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm so excited to be here and talk with you and commiserate around how messy this life we live actually is and the businesses we run actually are. I love it.
Yeah, that is my whole life philosophy. So glad you're here and so glad you agree, because perfection's not a goal I've ever achieved.
I'm with you. I love it. I love it.
So, so to start us off, tell me about your work. You have a really interesting focus in business leadership, and I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, thank you. So I founded Project More Happy in 2018. So it's been a hot minute since I have. When I originally founded it and launched it, it looks completely different than what it looks like today because business is messy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it all started out, I came from the world of advertising and marketing. And so I worked in really high pressure agencies. I worked on international campaigns. I was leading creative teams. I was, on paper, I was doing all the things that equal success. And yet I was not happy doing it. Um, the leadership didn't always support me in the ways I needed supported, in the ways my brain needed supported. I could see how, people were falling through the cracks that didn't need to be. And so when I kind of burnt out in that job, I went on my own personal journey to understand why, if I had all the boxes ticked, right? On paper, I was supposed to be happy and successful. I went down this journey of trying to understand why that wasn't the case. And it led me into behavioral science. It led me into positive psychology, which was always really interesting to me anyway. I actually double majored in advertising and sociology because I loved understanding how people work and mesh and exist together. And so I kind of went on my own journey. I started to like experiment with what I was reading and what I was learning, talking to people, and also how it applied to various points in my past, in my story to date. And so it led me to this really interesting intersection of, okay, we have this science of happiness, science of human flourishing, and it's a relatively new field, 30 years or so. But it's all shared as in you need to go fix yourself. If you want to be happy, here's what you need to do. And while that is very much true, like we have to invest in our own happiness, I had to do that journey for myself. What led me into the leadership piece and the leadership consulting is that when we understand that happiness is a skill and here's how we implement it for ourselves, then we can design for it in our workplaces and for our teams. So I now spend my time, I work with what I call happy leaders on this idea of happy leadership. And it's really about how you can take that science, how you can take what we know from positive psychology and how our brains actually work, and how we can design our world for us to succeed personally, but also for the people we have influence and impact on, for them to succeed too.
That's incredible. I have to say, in all of my years when I was an employee, um, being an employee, I never had one boss talk about happiness in the workplace. Lots of other potentially positive impact words and concepts,
Yeah,
but happiness wasn't an inclusion.
yeah.
And so, what kind of impact are you seeing when you go out and you do your work with these happy leaders? What kind of impact are you seeing on them personally, in their work, in their workplaces as a whole?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And I agree. I had some good leaders in the corporate world. I had some not so good leaders in the corporate world.
I mean, we all
Um,
do. Yeah.
we started seeing a trend when I was still working in that space around workplace well-being. But to me, a lot of that is very surface level. It's the perks. It's the again putting the onus on the employees to be able to invest time in themselves
Yeah.
and not actually carving out time for employees to do that, right? It's like one more thing to their to-do list if they do it. Um, on both a micro and macro level. So globally, we see and now understand the correlation between happiness and impact. And we see this because there's this study that's been going on the past couple of years, and this is the plainest way for me to share how this correlates. There's a study that Indeed.com has done the past couple of years on they're tracking the top 100 workplaces for well-being, right? So they're tracking how they are succeeding financially, how they're measuring up financially, and they're tracking it alongside, the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones. And so these indexes that we equate as the gold standards for economic success, right?
Yeah.
And what they found in this study is that the workplaces that are focused on happiness and employee well-being are outperforming the gold standards by which we measure everything else. So on a
Yeah.
big level, big picture view of it, like we can see how it's correlated. Now, when I go in and work with leaders, how do you translate that? Well, when you are enabling your employees to show up as their best selves, to contribute with the gifts that they bring to the table in the way that you probably originally hired them to, right? When the environment and the systems and processes are set up for them to succeed, then your employee retention rate goes up, right? And we know
Yeah.
that bringing on new employees is more expensive than keeping ones that you already have there. Your productivity goes up. Your output is higher because employees are more motivated. Innovation and creative problem solving go up because they are engaged in a way where they find meaning and want to contribute to their work. And they're in psychologically safe work environments that allow them to do that. So on a business by business company level, leaders who are investing and pouring into their teams and into their employees, they see it in the output and their impact can be larger because when you increase positive energy, when you increase those positive emotions, you're increasing engagement and you're increasing impact. And then that just like spirals out.
And honestly, I mean, coming from my own human resources perspective, that is always kind of the magic key that everyone's looking for. Because I've absolutely seen a million times well, we don't want to change anything, but can we slap a Band-Aid on this and
Mhm.
make everything magically better? And the answer is always no. I
Right,
mean, you can slap a
right,
Band-Aid on it and it'll be a Band-Aid's worth of better.
right.
But to actually have change, you need to change, which I will say seems very obvious when you say it that way. But
But it's
change is the
hard.
hardest thing.
It's so hard. It's hard because there's uncertainty around it,
Yeah.
right? Even if all the research says, here's what should happen if you make these changes, there's never a guarantee, right?
Mm-mm.
And so there is that uncertainty. So that's why a lot of us stay stuck in what we're currently doing because there's fear associated with what we're not doing. Now, I don't know who said it, but what I go back to a lot is that growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone. And that is both personal growth, but that is also growth in businesses. When you're stepping
Yeah.
into something that feels uncomfortable, when you're stepping into that fear and that uncertainty, that's where you're going to see the most growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're doing the same thing that everyone else is, being comfortable, not really pushing yourself forward, I mean, again, you're not pushing yourself forward. You're not making progress.
Right.
And sure, that's the whole philosophy. That's the whole weird and messy philosophy of it won't always be the perfect thing. Just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. But the flip side is you can't be successful if you're never uncomfortable.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. I'm also I love the messy analogy because I'm a big taco fan. Like This is weird.
Tell me about
But
that.
like, yeah, so no, so like my husband and I met when we were both living in Houston, Texas together. And like every date we went on, we would go get tacos. And he even like
Mm,
has a picture of me at one point because like when you get tacos in a taco place, like you just get fresh tortillas.
yeah.
And so I used to like carry aluminum foil wrapped tortillas in my purse sometimes. Like we'd leave a taco place and I'd be like, I still need these tortillas. But like even our wedding was like we had tacos at the wedding, and our first kid, we, called him the chorizo prince before telling anyone his name. Like we like tacos in my family. But I say this because there's this wonderful saying about tacos, this meme about tacos. And it's the idea that tacos are messy,
Yeah.
but we love them anyway. Life
Yes.
is messy. Learn to love the messiness of it.
I love that so much because honestly, that's like my whole philosophy of I love small joys because my life is full of small joys. And every once in a while, I'll get something huge that happens that I can be extraordinarily happy about. But most of the time, that's not happening.
Right.
So if I really celebrate the small things that are happening,
Hmm.
then I'm going to be a happier person.
Yes.
And the same
Yes.
thing with the weirdness and the messiness
Yeah.
is, oh my goodness, I tried when I was a kid, I tried so hard not to be weird, and I had to give that up early because
Same.
we're
Same.
all weird.
We are.
That's the thing that people don't tell you, or if they do, you don't listen, is we're all a bunch of weirdos spiraling around trying to do what we're doing, and that's how we all make it through.
Well, we have this false idea that there is a normal,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
not normal. There's not. And so, one of the pillars of happiness, so I talk about the pillars of happiness, the 8 skills we need to create more happiness in ourselves, in our lives, and in the world around us. And one of them, which is a really, really hard one because we're not raised practicing the skill very well, but it's the skill of authenticity. And that's that weird and messy.
Yeah.
That's the being okay with showing up as the person you are, irregardless of expectations put on you, irregardless of the labels that you may or may not want to wear. It's that vulnerability of it. But when you realize, as you just said, that we are all weird, we are all messy,
Hmm.
it's not so scary to show up authentically.
And honestly, that authenticity, your authentic self, that's the one thing you've got that no one else has. And that's the thing that everyone wants from us,
Yes.
you
Yes.
know?
And I translate that into business
Mm,
in because I think especially as business owners, right? There are thousands of other leadership consultants out there,
yeah, always.
right? But if I show up as my authentic self and I consult in a way that is true to me and my values and my story and how I see the world, and I bring that expertise into my leadership consulting authentically, then there is no one else who can do what I can do,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Like that is our superpower as business owners, as leaders, is showing up authentically to share your gift in a way that is true to you.
And I know that you have a lot of experience in branding.
I do.
And I would say that one of the struggles that I face, and a lot of business owners face, especially when you're first starting and it is just you,
Mhm.
or it's just you and a few other people, and a really experienced branding employee is not on your agenda.
Right.
How do you show that authentic self in the things that you present to the world in terms of marketing your business, in terms of just being there? Because I look at your website and I know you as a person, and I'm like, yep, that's Jessica. That's 100% her. And I know that I always want that as well, but I also tend to default back into a more formal voice than is really mine, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
So how do you make that balance for yourself? How do you make that presentation?
Yeah. So when I first launched Project More Happy, I think I was trying, and this was what, 7 years ago now. I think I was trying to be what people would expect um,
Yes.
my business to be. Um, and so it didn't have the flair and colors and energy that it has now. What I have come to realize is that one, energy is everything. Energy is everything. And that goes to your graphics too, right? And your authenticity shows up in your energy. So when I work with people, when I work with leaders, we really spend time defining what they want their leadership energy to be. Because we all want to show up in a certain way that is true to us, that is aligned to us, but that also invites people into conversation and collaboration with us, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things I want my brand to be, surprise, is I want it to be joyful, right?
Yeah.
So that allows me to play more with colors. It allows that energy to be infused into all those brand interactions people would have with me, whether online, in person, on social media, at speaking gigs, like all of those places, you will expect to find a playful energy about me. I also want to be an expert. So there is a tone of voice, and there is, the research-based side of my work that comes through a lot in all of my branding and my communication. But so I try to get people to really hone in on what is the energy you want to be bringing into conversations. And then you choose your colors and you choose your voice and you choose all those brand elements that we tend to go to first. And we say, okay, if I want my energy to be messy or weird, right? If I want that for my energy, I'm going to make very different decisions than if I want my energy to be trusted. Or
Yeah.
maybe there's a weird juxtaposition of I want to be trusted for being a little different. And
Yeah.
that would give you another unique energetic vibe that can translate to colors and fonts and all of that stuff.
That's incredible. I need to marinate on that so much more. Thank you
It's
so
all
much for that.
energy. Life is energy.
So, you've owned your business for quite some time.
Yeah.
As a business owner, what's the weirdest obstacle you've faced or, weirdest pivot you've had to make or chose to make?
Yes. I've had some weird pivots in this business.
Of
Again,
course.
what I launched as is looks nothing like what it is today. There were bits and pieces. There was a through line. The idea of my business was always to make the science of happiness accessible to people. Because I think it's stuck in academia right now. And I want like everyone to understand how happiness works so that we can all show up as our best selves and thrive. So that has always been a constant. But when I first launched, because I was coming from that advertising background, I launched with product lines. I was an online retailer.
What? Okay.
So I had a t-shirt line. I had they were called creative expression kits, which were art kits that the instructions would help you go through. Like if you were to make um, a banner based on your values, here's all the materials you need, here's the exercise we do, and then you can hang your banner to remind yourself of your values. Okay. So it was very retail focused. It was very tangible. And it made a lot of sense. Like that was the easiest baby step for me to take from where I was to getting out into the world, right? And the t-shirt line, um, all of that started getting really big right when COVID hit, as you can imagine.
Yep.
People wanted happiness. They were stuck. They wanted happiness for themselves. They wanted happiness to send to other people. So the t-shirt line really exploded when COVID hit, which brought a very interesting conundrum to me in that one, although you can't really tell based on the background and here, me and my family are very minimalist. We are not heavy consumers. We actually don't have an Amazon Prime account.
Gasp.
Um, I know. Um, because we're very intentional about our impact on the environment, but also on what we bring into our house. Because the more things you have, the more things you have to take care of. And so we're very intentional in those ways. So I had attention there on how my business was living in this space that I didn't even really exist inside. Right.
Yeah.
And then that's also when shipping and transit and all of that kind of imploded, right?
Yep.
So I would get t-shirt orders. I would get, all these t-shirt orders, and then I would have to send out an email to every single person every day to give them an update on where we were at in the process because the whole supply chain had imploded.
Yeah.
And on
Yeah.
top of it, I had kids at home because of COVID and, all the things that everyone else was dealing with. And so it kind of, in that moment, I said, do I want to be doing what I'm doing now? No, I did not want to be sending all these emails. And like, to me, I wasn't giving happiness if people were waiting for their stuff to come in the mail. It was at odds with what I was trying to do. And two, I didn't live in that space. So why was my business living in that space?
Yeah. No, that
And
was
so
antithetical to your actual values.
I know. And that's
Yeah.
actually how I ended up in this space to begin with, because the advertising career didn't align with my values, right? Like I was doing global commercials for fast food companies when we don't eat fast food. Like it was so out of alignment.
Yep.
Um, and so I was much quicker to notice that with this, but I had to go, okay, if it's not going to be, if Project More Happy isn't going to be retail based on what it is now, I have to pivot and figure out what is it I actually want this to be and what is meaningful to other people. And so during that time is when I went and got all my coaching certifications so that in that virtual COVID space, I started offering more coaching alongside I'd still do branding and marketing consulting, which I still do some today. But I did have to, there came a point in the business where I was like, I'm walking away from how I launched this business
Yeah.
to take the through line, take the I want to make the science accessible. And I had to figure out what that looked like that was more true and in alignment with who I am. And the messiest part of all that is how do you communicate that to people
Yeah.
who love you as a retail place, to people who didn't know you in this space. And so there were a lot of learnings during that time. I still have a lot of those retail people, though, those folks that follow me and engage with the brand still in this new identity and world, because the through line and the mission never changed. It was just how I offered it to people.
And I think that's such a valuable lesson of sometimes we're trying to go in a certain direction to achieve something in the world, and it might take a few iterations to figure out genuinely how we contribute that.
Yes.
And I think that's an incredible journey to just realize, oh, I thought it was going to be selling this one thing when it's really communicating as a service and, getting leaders behind what you're trying to do, which honestly might make a larger happiness impact at the end of the day.
Well, that's what I say. It took me a while to start playing big as a business
Yeah.
owner. And I
Yeah.
think that's true to a lot of us. We make ourselves smaller because we don't want to invite what could be seen as failure or what could, bring on criticism or judgment. So we make ourselves smaller and we say, this is a safe place to stay, even though every single one of us could have this huge impact on how, not the world, the big world, but how our worlds feel and how we impact the world directly outside our doors.
But that's how we make those larger impacts.
Yeah.
Those larger impacts don't happen until and unless those smaller impacts happen first. And so if we want to change the world, you can only start where you are.
Yeah.
So I love that that's where you're coming from. And absolutely, I think this is an indication for everyone to think, take to our hearts, how am I not playing big right now? Because again, it's easy to say, oh, I don't know, who am I to be an expert in this field
Right.
and declare myself as someone people should listen to. But if you really think about it, who else?
That's
Who
exactly.
better?
It goes back to that authenticity piece, right? Like we all have our own perspective and experiences that no one else has. So we all have that gift to share to others. And some people may receive that gift and some people may not. And that's okay too. We're not supposed to be everything to everyone.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Well, that leads me perfectly to the final question of
right.
today, which is, Jessica, how do you define success?
Yeah. I love this question. I teach a whole class on this quarterly here in Kansas City because we don't tend to spend a lot of time thinking about the metrics that we need to be defining success by, either individually or as a business. As a business, we tend to default to you're successful if you're making a certain amount of revenue. And yes, every business needs to be able to fund itself. And if you want to be a growing business, you need to be increasing your revenue. That said, because my through line, because my mission, because what I want to do at the end of the day is tied to making happiness and the science of happiness more accessible to all, I focus on that to all piece. So my metric, my how I measure success in my business is around impact. And I measure impact based on the amount of conversations I have, based on the amount of people I engage with, whether at speaking events, whether online. So I track my conversations, I track how many people have come into my ecosystem. And that's how I measure whether or not Project More Happy is successful because it's about making the science accessible. So it's about me getting it out to more people.
I love that so much. That is a beautiful definition of success. So Jessica Lyonford, thank you again for joining me today. Where should people find you online?
Yeah, so I make it very easy, jessicalyonford.com. And you can link off to the podcast there, the newsletter there, all of the goodness there over at jessicalyonford.com.
Fantastic. Everyone, go to jessicalyonford.com. And thank you everyone for listening. You can find Success is Weird and Messy wherever you get your podcasts, and it helps us so much if you follow, rate, and review. Talk to you next time. I don't know how to